ladies and gentlemen. This is Balázs speaking from Rollout IT. This is going to be a roundtable discussion webinar mostly about JavaScript, TypeScript, frontend, backend, and so on. Let us start with a quick introduction, personal and company intro as well. So as for me, I'm a senior developer with around 10 years of experience in web and mobile development, and I'm also the founder of Rollout IT. Nowadays, I'm focusing primarily on our developers, working with our clients, improving our processes in our projects. But I actually do work with Vue.js on a daily basis still. Since 2018, at Rollout IT, we do end-to-end mobile and web development, and working very closely with our partners, mostly in Agile framework, to build fairly cool apps and products. We are getting more and more awesome partners to work with. So I thought that it's the time to start sharing some experience, some thoughts with our fellow developers, especially around the JavaScript setup, what we love to work with. So we have Dénes and Kristijan in the room, and let's Peter join. He is right here, and the goal of this call is to discuss our best practices of JS frameworks on both the front end and the back end, and also to answer your questions. Two operative notes while Peter is joining. You might wondering why we are speaking English. So Kristijan is joining from Serbia. So it's an obvious reason why we speak English from that point. And our project at Rollout IT are mostly international. So we work people from all around the world. Our developers are mostly from Central and East Europe. But our partners are from Canada, from Hong Kong, from Europe. So it's varied. And another operative note, please feel free to send us questions on the chat during the webinar. We will stop periodically and answer your questions, especially on the end of webinar. We dedicate some time for the questions. Okay, Peter, can you hear us?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks for joining as well. So let's continue with a quick introduction of our speakers. So Peter, who just joined, is a senior software architect with like 15+ years of experience. He has experience in all different languages and frameworks. Let's just pick a few what he has been working at Rollout IT, like PHP, React, Vue, .NET, Node.js, and a lot more. He's with Rollout IT for 1.5 years and working full-time for one of our Canadian partners as an architect. Dénes is a senior front-end developer with more than 4 years of experience. He's very adaptive. He's leading the front-end development in the project, discussing requests and topics with all the stakeholders in the enterprise project. He is specialized to React.js, and he joined Rollout IT almost a year ago. Kristijan from Serbia has 8 years of experience in both front-end and back-end development, everything which is web he likes to do, but primarily he's on the Laravel, Vue, Node.js stack. And he also has a great knowledge on web application security, and I know that he's very detail-oriented on his front-end work. He joined Rollout IT around a year ago, and nowadays he's mostly busy with our internal projects. So yeah, I think that's the intro. Let's kick it off. We are going to have a roundtable discussion, and let's start with a warm-up question. Guys, can you please tell us a little bit more on your first framework experience in your career, when you met your first framework, and then what was your path to get to know it, to learn it, and which frameworks you are the most experienced with? I don't know, let's pick someone in the room. Kristijan, what do you think?
Let's go first. Hi,
Hi all. Yeah, I actually get interested in computers and development. I mean, general computers in my early ages, even in elementary school. So I was playing there. I mean, in Bash and DOS at these times. Yeah, that was my early start. But regarding the framework itself, I would say it would be my first year of high school. So yeah, I had actually the privilege to work in one experimental school where the focus was not actually on theory. We had more and a lot more practice than theory. So yeah, we started experimenting with .NET frameworks, actually with C# and in Swarms. So I would say also ASP.NET. So I would say that it was my first framework. But yeah, I mean, as I grew up, I explored a lot of different fields. And right now, I would say that I'm more skilled in the Vue.js framework because I will work on daily basis for, I don't know, like 4 years there. And yeah, that's about that. Laravel is also best combination with Vue. So yeah, I'm quite good at both.
Cool, thanks. How about you, Dinesh? Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm muted. Just a... All right, so I started my programming career during my university years. At the university, we were studying, you know, like some C#, Java, and then I thought that, oh yeah, well, maybe Ruby and Lua looks really good, but it wasn't really for me, and that's why I decided to go for the web. And at the start, I was doing full stack, so like front end, backend. For backend PHP, front end, you know, jQuery, JavaScript, site building. But after like half a year, I was into it. ES6 came out, so then needed to relearn a lot of JavaScript stuff. And my first experience with a JavaScript front-end framework was the moment when I was copy-pasting some snippets to building a HTML page, and I was thinking like, how good it were if we had some technology to use these snippets as HTML elements and not just copy-paste them, but maybe put them in a for loop or some kind of loop and just, you know, program the page. And after that day, I knew that my devices were spying on me because my Facebook feed was full of React stuff. And I decided to, oh yeah, let's check out what this React is. So that's how I ended up with technically React. First, I was comparing Angular, Vue.js, React, and I found Vue a little weird for my junior taste. Angular really enterprise and really complex. But I really liked how React is flexible. Everything is in JS, and boom, let's do it. That's for me. So technically, yeah, that is how I ended up with React. On the other hand, I really consider myself a jack of all trades, master of none, because after learning React, I had a lot of job opportunities where they said like this, oh, you know React, that's good. Then you will love this Vue.js project with the Doctrine API. And like, oh yeah, that's cool. And the next one, oh, React, cool. Then you will like this Angular. So hell yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, we can dive deeper in a moment. But Peter, how is your story?
So I'm kind of old school developer guy. So I started my career in the 80s. So I was very young, but so my first framework experience was with the Amiga computers intuition library and the exec library. So it's before the internet and before the web. So it's some kind of library and a mix of the frameworks. So it both managed the life cycle of the component as well, but it was designed in a different way. So it was data oriented instead of object oriented framework. And of course, I My very first experience was Commodore 64, but there was no framework. So it's Geos wasn't a framework, so it was different. Then I moved to different languages and libraries. For example, mentioned .NET or C and C++. And for example, I had experience with the Boost library, which I really liked. And after that, in Java, of course, the Spring Boot libraries. And I had a long story with it, ActionScript, especially with ActionScript 3. They had some famous libraries like Robotlex for the MVC and Starling as a gaming platforms, for example. And after that, so I been like a full stack guy after all, and of course I did use React, and I am still using it. Sometimes Vue, sometimes even I am experimenting with Svelte, for example, to see what is possible, and WebAssembly as well. So I am really interested what JavaScript capable of above these frameworks and above this. So what are the possibilities in a browser in deep level, for example?
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic. Yeah, so just touching this topic, when to go with like pure JavaScript, or when do you think you need to use a JavaScript framework? What do you guys think? What are the pro cons of picking a popular JavaScript framework rather than just kick off the project with like pure, I don't know, ES6 JavaScript setup, or with Webpack, or in a more simple setup? How is the debate? What's your decision process? At first, on this level, not just which framework to pick. That's gonna be a question coming in the list. But why use a JavaScript framework eventually rather than just kick off the project with pure object-oriented JavaScript?
I think one of the factors are the security and the pro and security of a framework. For example, you don't have to test it always for different security hosts and everything, because a bigger community testing it. And the other stuff, it gives a solid form of how you need to structure your project, and some reusable components, for example. But even if you use a popular framework, it not can be avoided to see the documentation, how is good. So if it has a good community and the documentation is stable and the version is stable, then I think it's a good choice. Any of the frameworks. Of course, the less popular frameworks can have some advance as well. For example, this Svelte, because it using a different approach, which is points to the future in some way, but of course it needs some time to let it known by the others.
Yeah, for me, choosing a framework or ES6 is also, I always consider the scale of the project, because at a larger project, obviously we'll need a front-end framework for reusability and the structure, as you said. But for like smaller projects, so for example, a page for different restaurants or little companies, you don't always need to use a front-end framework. It's just side building, and some of the reactivity can be done in pure JavaScript. So that is also a thing to consider, in my opinion.
Yeah, it really depends on the business. So what is the end goal? What is the future? So I mean, we can achieve anything with pretty much anything, but yeah, sometimes course of action or some tools which we can consider using can be overkill. Like Dénes said, I mean, we can use framework, we implement for the presentation websites, but that would be overkill because we will. What's the purpose of bringing the entire framework if we are going to use only the like less than 10% of it? So yeah, sometimes we have to pretty much balance to see which things do we need and what is the future.
Yeah, exactly. I agree, and especially if the project, I mean, we had a request to make a prototype even more advanced. Like we got a clickable prototype created in Figma from external design team, but the client planned to do a more intensive user research using this prototype, but some user has been confused with the really static data, and our task was eventually to reuse the exported pages and then just make a store, like have a space to store some data written by the users. It was a flight booking application, mock or prototype, and it was, you know, zero backend, no complexity, just a small scale prototype which gonna be thrown away eventually. So two developers was quickly done it with like pure JavaScript. There were not really a good reason to pick any of the framework for that type of stuff. So so yeah, I think the scale of the project and also the goals, the business goals, and the scale of the team can be a decision maker here. Yeah, so what are the key indicators if you decided like the scale of the project, the team, and the long term or the goals of the project, everything pointing to the direction that let's kick it off with a framework? What are the key indicators? How you guys choose a framework from the popular options?
By the number of users, first of all. So this is a good point to check. If it's very popular and a lot of people use it, then it won't be a big issue, and you can find support for it, for example, if you stop with something. And I think that's also important how it does fit to your existing tool chain or toolkit you are working with. For example, if you are using some specific style generator frameworks like Sass or RSS or even other libraries, then can you use a Webpack, for example, for the given library to transpile and compress together the components. So, you know, JavaScript gives very high flexibility in this, but sometimes it's good if this job is already done by the creator of the framework. And if you mix, for example, TypeScript with JavaScript, does this framework comes with the types definitions and so on. That's all we can consider.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking about the adaptability or the support of different technologies of frameworks and how they tie to each other, because my first React project was something I inherited from another developer, and that stack they used for the backend did not support the React, but only Angular. But the developer did not really like Angular, so he put a React application into an Angular application, and it was kind of weird for me to start with. But yeah, so technically that's what I wanted to share, to always check for different technology supports. And maybe another factor I always check if that specific technology is backed by some bigger companies, because sometimes open source projects can be really good and flattering, but the moment they decide to just end it, it will end there. And then if you want to upgrade maybe to another technology, then you will need to rewrite almost everything.
Yeah, I mean, at least, this can happen even if the framework backed up with an enterprise, like the Angular 1, Angular JS is still backed up by Google, but at least it's ending very, very smoothly and nicely. Like it's still in long-term support for years. They still release like security patches and keep up with the old framework. So yeah, I understand what you mean. If it's handled by the big company, it might be more safe than if it's only on the community. Yeah.
I would say that choosing the framework is really important step because I mean, we developers like to explore. Yes, that's nice. But I mean, when we are making the decision, the initial decision, that's really important because they are not just developers here. I mean, the business is also included. So from our decision, actually, we can increase or decrease the business risks because I mean, if we can make bad decision, yeah, it will cost us a lot. So I mean, this is a really important step. I mean, this is not some third-party library which we can decide and switch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so what would be some indicators for me? Like Peter said, community, really important. But I would also say the acceleration of support, because I mean, we have some stable frameworks like React.io, Angular, which have huge amount of people who are supporting that. But yes, and if new framework develops, I mean, he cannot that quickly pick up. So I mean, the acceleration rate steep of the curve is also a big role there. Also, documentation is playing huge role because I mean, if you have not that good documentation, yeah, you will spend some times doing that. So yeah, from community you can learn a lot. You can see what are the pro and cons, and yeah, that's important.
Yeah, and I think the business goals are also really important to consider. For example, if an application has an open-facing part like a job portal, server-side rendering, and all the search engine optimization tool is something what you really need to consider. Unless if you're working in an internal tool used by one company's employee and everything is behind the login, then server-side rendering is not important to make the application setup more complex, I believe. So for example, we know that some frameworks are a better match to support server-side rendering, like we have Next and Nuxt with React and Vue. And like as far as I know, Angular is a little bit harder to deal with if we are talking about server-side rendering, or you need to do more customization and deal more things by your own. So that could be also a differentiator. What's the business plan? Whether there is something in a particular framework which feature you believe is going to be very beneficial for you from the business side, or even how you set up your state management over time, when like in React, Redux or a complex state management has been the like the default decision, but then the community nicely evolved, and now it's different, and there are better practices. Sometimes it's not reasonable to start with a fairly complex state management if your application and business goals are not reasoning that decision. And yeah, I 100% agree with you guys. It's a very important decision. However, still, it's not. It should not be something which increase your technical debt. So I constantly, when we get into a new project at Rollout IT, we do code review usually, and there has been a case when we suggested the client to basically recreate the application with another framework setup, not because we are more experienced with we has been experienced with both, but because it was a much better fit for their business goals, and because the application has been written in React native, and it was like also a good idea to keep the development team unified and also do the application in React at that point. And we were able to move a big part of the code base, but not the messy part and not the misused framework features which we needed, or which caused a lot of technical debt in the project. So even though it's a very, very important decision, there are cases when you need to be cautious enough and change the direction, I believe. Okay, other interesting topic. So now,
sorry, can I jump in before next
yeah,
question?
of course. Sorry.
I'm just thinking about, I would say that history is really important. So I mean, if you take a look at history of the framework itself, I would also take a look how many major and breaking changes they had. So this is really cool indicator. I mean, not just how many, but what was changed entirely. I mean, if the framework was changed majorly in a lot of percentage of itself, that's not good indicator. I mean, obviously, when you have some simple cases, you can achieve easily everything with any framework. But I mean, with how complexity grows, there you can see some edge cases which you are not that obvious in the beginning. And this situation can actually show how some framework is actually giving ability, how it doesn't give you wings, so you can easily overcome these problems or no. So if you had a lot of breaking changes, and between these breaking changes you had really big difference, so this is not a good indicator. Because I mean, it depends. If you have a small project, it's really easy to migrate to the next version, but we had situation in one of the previous companies where they wanted to upgrade, and it was 2 years old project. So it took like 2 months to upgrade. So it can be really, really costly sometimes.
Yeah, that's I'm with you on that.
Yes, and even a single framework during the versions, there might be not breaking changes, but changes to be considered, like the React with the hooks. Does it use the old class style approach or the hooks? The people can decide before the project or need to rework the components. And also for the view as well. The view tree brings a lot of things in. So I think it's really important to choose between the versions as well during the life cycle of the project.
Absolutely. We got a question about Svelte. So do you guys think Svelte is mature enough ecosystem for building a medium large scale application?
Yes, I think it is, but of course it still needs the bigger community. So if you can take it, almost has the download number of any other libraries. So it's no very popular, but in the documentation part is not very deep yet. So of course the basics of the Svelte is a different approach. It doesn't use any virtual DOM. It doesn't use these life cycle steps. So it's like a specialized compiler for the web. So it's at this point it's mature enough to let develop components and for example with the new component development approach which is in the browsers now, then it has more value added now as the web evolves. So
yeah, and we were talking about technical factors, how to choose a framework, but there are also like other type of factors. For example, if you would like to scale up your engineering team in a short term, then you might gonna have some headache with like brand or newer technologies or technologies which developers are not familiar with right now. So be cautious choosing Svelte, but
in the first decision is with Svelte. So this requires a very different approach. Then you cannot jump in between the frameworks easily. So like between React and Vue, it is relatively easy to change things because it has the same methodology behind. So, and of course, if you are using a TypeScript based or JavaScript based project, there are parts you can fill the gap, and with Svelte as well. But it's not easy to change later the framework when you decide to not use it.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the question as well. Okay, another interesting topic besides the SPA, single page application frameworks. Nowadays, we see more and more usage of static site generators. Next.js, Hugo, Gatsby, Jekyll, and numerous others. What do you guys think? Is there a debate between choosing single page application framework or go ahead and kick off the project with a static site generator?
Well, I think it depends on the context, because, for example, if you want a page that is search engine optimized and really SEO friendly, then obviously SSG is the must go. For React, as you said, there is the Next.js, which also has not just static site generating, but server-side rendering as well. And the other one, if you don't want to be really Next.js dependent and want a little more flexibility, then maybe Gatsby. But yeah, and for single page applications, technically, if you use Next.js, after the initial load of the page, it will technically become a single page application, like so. Everything will be smooth and really quick. So the customer or the user will feel like he or she is in a native app.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, I got you, Dénes, on this topic.
It's always like this, depends on the context of the goal. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yes, and also there's an important part. If you design an SPA application, if it runs on mobile, you have to consider how it uses the mobile network, for example, and how stable is the network it's using, and what are the techniques. Are you using a REST API behind or some graph network, graph-based API, for example?
Yeah, and how many times the data behind the app is going to change, how frequently you should regenerate static sites, or your data is coming from other systems, then it's even harder to handle with an SSG setup.
And if you have the choice, for example, in case of React, you can use the native version or the non-native version. So you have to decide first how to support this whole project if you plan to go on mobile, because for example the typical JavaScript can deplete your batteries on the if you design it in the wrong way, for example, on mobile. It can make bigger overload than the normal applications which is designed for mobiles. So of course, it's not a big issue now because the devices are evolving, but for weaker devices, it's another point to consider.
Yeah, especially for older devices, you said. Okay, other things to discuss is whether you had any experience by tools or third-party library or something became obsolete or unmaintained suddenly. How frequently you see a problem with the third parties you picked for the framework with version support. Is it something which frequently cause headache, or what are your strategy to choose a third party what you believe it's going to be fine in the future?
I think
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think that the long time support packages should be go first. So if something is long time supported, then you can prove then you will have it if like 2 or 4 years in the future. Of course, there are multiple choices. Even without there are new projects. So there are a lot of new projects. Even without Node, you could use Dino, for example, but it still lacks of some support or the new versions of the JavaScript. So I think in 2021 JavaScript version was the 12th JavaScript. So it's with ECMAScript. So it's all has some parts which we'll bring into the process in the future. But for long-term support, it's I think it's just the fresh and the before fresh versions is a good choice. And for NPM packages, for example, you have to be cautious. So it can be changed too fast. So without any backlog history or something like that. So
sometimes it can be also challenging. I mean, not that challenging, not that serious, like choosing the framework, but yeah, it has some consequences if you make wrong decision. Weekly downloads is a really good indicator because if a package is frequently used, this is a really good sign. Also, open issues on the repository. And yeah, community again. I mean, if the package is maintained by one guy, that package can be great. But I had a situation where, oh, that was also one idea. When package, let's first finish this one. When package is handled by one guy, it can be a real problem sometimes if that guy just disappears sometimes and doesn't want to go further. Yeah, that's a problem. Also, I just realized I didn't want to bring any racism here, but I had experience where some packages, really good packages, like from package where are pretty much communist. Yeah, we had bad experience with that because they have tendency just either to completely disappear or to completely change the way how they work. So it's if they are managed by group of people, some crowd, yeah, this is really good because you have stability and stable factor there.
another thing, if it's on the source is on GitHub, I always look at the issue tracking there. So how they respond on the issues and how many issues there and how much is resolved. So it's a good sign if it's a reliable package or not. So
fortunately, I never experienced an outdated package. I completely agree with both of you. So technically, number of contributors, the history of the package, and the downloads, maybe the stars on GitHub. What I like to consider, well, maybe the version changes. Well, that's another topic, I think.
If I can add, documentation is again crucial. One big step. And there is one site which I can share with you. It's called Banphobia. It's really great, and I always check the package there. That is quite simple, but yeah, pretty helpful web page where you can see pretty much the changes in the ban per version, which is really great indicator. So if because I mean, at least on the front end, we are all the time fighting the size of the battle. If you are not paying attention, it can just grow rapidly. And if you have rapid increase in the versions, that is bad indicator. Also, the Bandophobia says if that package is recheckable, which is also important in Web Vitals and performance optimization. So yeah, this is a good indicator. So you're muted, Balash.
I'm sorry. I was just yeah. I think we discussed a few things about the front-end frameworks. Yeah, let's touch a little bit on the backend JavaScript frameworks. Like I don't know, let's pick, you know, we have even full stack JavaScript frameworks, which expect you, or which guides you how to manage both the backend and the framework, like Next.js. We have different type of framework set up for a monolith or microservice node or JavaScript application. What do you guys think on frameworks used on the backend side?
So I would go for the most popular ones, so like Express with Helm. Of course, it needs a strong security layer because Express has some leaks in that point. And of course, if I consider Node as a backend, I always put some proxy before that. So for some reason for security, for example, Nginx is very good, and for example, for some key generation as well, is often used as a reverse proxy, for example, and to tie things together. If you have a multi-component or multi-service microservice framework, for example, it is good to use some proxy before it. And another thing for technically, I think for the backend, this I mentioned earlier, this Dino is a new candidate, is made by the same person as Node. And that's why the name is just reversed, and it has the advantage that it has only a single tool, so you don't need npx for the npm for the package management, for example, and some higher level security inside, so you cannot access the environment variables without permission and so on. So there are some security things. Of course, it's not. I think no crypto library yet. That's one thing which needs to be added in the future, and it's still in beta. So it's it depends on how the community accepts it. So it's a good. So there are some good points in Dino against Node.js, but of course, it has in the new version, it has a compatibility layer as well. So you can use just like the Node, use it. And of course,
sorry.
And of course, with the newer approaches, so you have some AWS Lambda functions and so on. The serverless work, it's more even supported in Dino.
And we forgot one really good indicator, key indicator, is TypeScript support. I mean, JavaScript is, I mean, it has a beauty because is not that strict language like some other languages, but there is also a problem there. It's double-sided sword. I mean, gives you flexibility, but on the backend side, backend doesn't tolerate all the errors, doesn't forgive all the errors. So we have to be really careful there. So I would say that also one of the indicators would be the TypeScript support for them, because especially in the backend, typing is really, really crucial. And always business goals. I mean, if you, some things are obvious. I mean, I work on one platform which was working with streaming. So obviously, I mean, there is never a question, would you choose monolith or microservice architecture? It's obvious that you are going to use microservice because you expect the scalability issues later. So that's why you choose microservices. But yeah, always we have to have a big picture in mind.
Yeah, and also a monolith, you can monitor the usage or identify if your monolith application is slowing down for a reason. Like we had a case when we identified that a certain module which is generating reports and other type of aggregated data periodically is just slowing down some other part of the application, or the event logger module, which was at the time part of the monolith, and received a lot of event, sometimes had an impact on the rest of the application. Also, we took these two modules, put them on Lambda, make a very lightweight serverless application around them, and then all these headache just gone, and still it has been working very well since that. So it's like in between, not really a microservice based setup by default, but from that point the rest of the application is still a monolith. But the heaviest part has its own service, so it's also possible to make something custom in between microservice and monolith.
In my experience, I think it's good approach if you design the microservices for the scalability view, but think just split when it's necessary. So based on the scalability, because sometimes it happened that for example, I saw in projects that given microservice job just to calculate something and return the result. So, and it wasn't considered in the time. It doesn't wasn't very scalable because there was a huge number of small cores, and it was bad in the connection side. So what you would want with the microservice itself, you lost always with the connection pool and the connection time. So it's needs to be used wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we touched base, yeah, a little bit. We discussed about TypeScript. What I'm really curious on what do you guys think? If you need to kick off a new project, TypeScript is the way to go by default, or is there a case when you would kick it off with like ES6 JavaScript, or if there is a project which has been built with pure JavaScript, I mean a framework, but not use TypeScript, would you introduce TypeScript incrementally and like refactor the project on the way when someone needs to touch a module? What's your practices with TypeScript and what's your preference?
Well, I think it is also dependent on the scale of the project because, for example, when I play around just with some new technologies, I don't really need TypeScript. When I'm working alone, I don't necessarily need TypeScript. Also, it can be good even using APIs and checking the types, so I will not be lost in the different objects. But when it becomes a really teamwork heavy project, or when I know that it must scale to the moon, then obviously I think TypeScript is a must to have in the project.
I think even TypeScript can be misused. So it's not a full solution for everything. So I mostly seen the keyword any in TypeScript project, which is a bad choice. So and of course it always comes with the connection between some components and some third-party libraries and libraries without types. So it's always good to consider for the, of course, the scale of the project and the how experienced the team is, because the experienced developer, I think, only use these contracts for the API. So it's important to use styles and types. Sorry, types. it's important to use types when you call something and it requires a given data type. But from the front end approach, I don't think it's necessary if you anyways protecting your data in a different way, for example, to avoid XSS scripting or something like that. So that's the point when types can come in the front end as well, but there are many ways to protect against the different data types.
Mm-hmm.
So for an API, I think it's a good approach. For example, GraphQL are using types, so you can communicate with the backend keeping the types in it. And so you don't need necessarily the TypeScript, but it's for example, for the simplicity, sometimes it's good to have. But for example, I haven't seen any perfectly forged project in TypeScript yet, which would use some techniques which is recommended by TypeScript. So, but it depends on how you plan to use it.
Yeah, I mean, you can misuse it, and it has some limitation and maybe a learning curve, and maybe might be a small overhead to like double think your type, but on the same time, it even on the front end, I believe it gives you a lot of power, you know, to just by the type checking system, and you know, you can bypass it, and you can use any which hopefully going to be cut on code review, but so if I need to kick off a project which is a long-term project and not something like small scale, we tend to use TypeScript on both the backend and the front end. It gives a lot of power, and it's just it even helps the team dynamics to make sure that everything is cautious and thinking of types. And it's possible, like Swagger has an excellent TypeScript support, so it's going to give you like TypeScript based typing definitions for your API very easily. So I think there is numerous advantages, but yeah, I agree. And you need to use it well, and not spend, you know, a lot of time to tweak with TypeScript if something is too hard to manage in it.
For example, I can bring up the React with hooks. It's a very good example for there are two ways to use it, the TypeScript part, and TypeScript itself is perfectly fits into the hooks definition, and you can, if you know that, then you can use it perfectly. But if you didn't know that before you start using React, for example, then you can move to wrong ways by using it. So you have to know exactly what hooks are and how they work. Then you can stably use the TypeScript above that, for example.
TypeScript is not the perfect solution, but Dynamic is the best what we have. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, there is some things which I also don't like about TypeScript, but I also highly recommend using it because it has a lot more benefits than cons. So, and yeah, if we are talking about some practical smooth how we can type some project which is long running and that did get TypeScript previously, I mean, we had the same case. There we just bring TypeScript, disable all the rules, and just going one by one, and not making them as an errors, which can block other guys, but also as warnings. So I think, yeah, it's a pretty painful flow, but and time consuming. But yeah, it's in the end, it can really help to in advance in some problems which we would not see that easily at the beginning. So yeah, both the front and the back end is highly recommended.
And another example, sorry, just to telling that in the early days of the Vue, for example, I did work on a project which is used TypeScript, but all the examples of the Vue page was written in JavaScript, so it was hard to adapt, and there was some changes over the framework as well, so which changed the life cycle of it and so on. So it's no, I think TypeScript is mature enough to use it, but of course this misuse is still exists, so it depends on the project.
Although I really like Vue, yeah, I must say that Vue 2 is actually not that. It's nicely covered by the TypeScript, but there is some cases where, I mean, just error is not obvious. It's really hard times to see some errors, some mistake. But yeah, I'm looking forward for the view 3 because there's huge improvement there regarding the script. So yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Great. I think we gathered the pros and cons and how to be cautious with TypeScript or without TypeScript on both the front end and the back end. Do you guys have any topics? What do you think we should discuss? In the meantime, I'm checking whether we got any questions on Facebook, but we don't get any new question yet. Okay, then. Yeah, so in this case, I think we are completed this webinar around JavaScript and frameworks. Please still, keep sending us comments or questions on the Facebook video. We're gonna share it in YouTube video and in our Medium blog. You can check our previous webinars or our blog articles at rolloutit.net and just go to our Medium. But you can also check out our website. I hope you will like it. So yeah, we covered lots of different aspects of frameworks, SPA frameworks, server-side generation frameworks, backend frameworks, front-end frameworks. I hope you guys enjoyed and meet you next time, probably in 2 months with another topic, hopefully around microservices and monoliths. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for Dénes, Kristijan, and Peter joining us and giving us all your thoughts.
Thank you. Have a nice one. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.